Welcome, everyone, to Rock FM Radio. This is the beginning of a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. We've been here for 6 seasons. We're on about like episode 39, something like that. And of course, we are here to talk about your Missouri basketball Tigers. On the other side of this window is at Data Mizzou, Matt Watkins. He is our data expert, data mining expert. Part-time lawyer, full-time basketball podcast host. Matt, it's been a while since we've had you on the podcast. It's sort of been a crazy June. How are things with you?
Doing well. Yeah, it's been the roles have been reversed. The data analyst has been put on the back burner, and the real job is kind of on the front burner. So. But yeah, it's been good. Things are good, you know.
A lot of City FC games.
Yes, I did take one of those in person. It was a good time. If you've not been and you have a taste for the local food scene, I would recommend it.
Yeah, it is. They did do a good job of setting up the park for any St. Louis natives. Anybody that's followed this podcast long enough knows that I am a St. Louis native and live there now. Matt has since joined the Saint Hooligans, and he is a resident of St. Louis County and an avid soccer fan. But yeah, so I have not been to the park yet. I do want to go to the park. You know, I'm a big Balkan food truck fan, so I'm looking forward to be able to go and watch soccer and eat lamacun. So anybody that doesn't know, it's sort of just like a little wrap, and it's delicious. But you can just go to their shop in Webster and get it too. This is not Missouri Tiger basketball. We should be talking about Missouri Tiger basketball because it's been a pretty eventful series of events. Now, we skipped an official episode of Dive Cuts last week. We just had Law Murray, who's the Clippers beat writer, on. I don't know if you got a chance to watch that. If you didn't, please go back and watch it, or listen to it through your podcast feed. Law was terrific. A lot of good takes on Kobe and how Kobe kind of fits into the Clippers. So that happened. The NBA draft. Demoy Hodge was signed to a 2-way deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. And then the last time, or since Matt was last on the podcast, Connor Vanover and Caleb Brown basically committed or recommitted in Caleb's case to finishing out the Missouri basketball roster. That roster is complete. And then in 2024 news, we thought John Bol was committed to Florida. He was for a period of 3 weeks, and then he decommitted to Florida. And it sounds like Florida is not even in the picture anymore. So Florida's not happening for John Bol. Maybe Missouri gets back into the picture because they got a commitment from one of John Bol's AAU teammates, a gentleman by the name of Antonio. He goes by T.O. Barrett, a combo guard out of Oklahoma who will be attending Link Academy in Branson, Missouri, this upcoming season. Pretty big commitment, top 100 kid, a guy that they liked very early. That's always a good thing, right, Matt?
Yes, it is. And I would say at the outset that I'm a fan of the T.O. Barrett signing. I think he's going to be a good player, but I do have an immediate guttural reaction to a point guard or combo guard being named T.O. It's similar to a pitcher named Homer Bailey or Bob Locke. It seems like it's, maybe he's very good at ball protection, but that immediately strikes a bit of fear into my viewing of him. But no, he's a very good player. I think, he'll be attending Link, and that has blown up from nothing really to one of the premier prep programs in the country. So,
yeah,
the players that are going there they've got talent.
Yeah, they believe they got a commitment from like the top overall player in the class in the 2024 class. Aaron Rowe, Columbia's finest 2025 recruit, is already down there. So yeah, they've got a lot going on, and so he's gonna basically go. He was playing it in Edmond North, which is a suburb of Oklahoma City, and apparently knows Trent Pierce already. They competed against each other when Pierce was at Union before going out to Arizona Compass Prep. And so those two know each other. That's kind of helpful. But going from Edmond, where you're kind of going to be the guy who is, one of, if not the best player in the state of Oklahoma, to a program where you're maybe the fifth or sixth best player on that roster, should prepare him quite well for transitioning into college, where, at least right off the bat, I mean, not a lot is going to be expected from him other than maybe some, bit contributions here and there.
Yeah, I think it will help prepare him. And I do, I don't follow the summer league as close as Matt Harris does, but I have come to know that his summer program, MoKan in Kansas City, is one of the better at preparing players for the next level. They do play good basketball. It is, I don't want to get into the stereotypes of summer league, but a lot of these rosters are thrown together, moving pieces. They don't practice much. They go out and it's a showcase. Where when you see MoKan, they definitely look like a team that knows what's going on. And I like players that are used to playing basketball the way the coach wants them to play basketball. So, there's a lot of good things there, because I believe Aiden Shaw played there. And then you've got the Oklahoma connection that seems to be growing with Trent Pierce and T.O. Barrett now. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Jesus Carolero was one of the first players down at Link. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Link actually started as just like a prep program. So like a post high school graduation, like a one season you can go. And Carlero did spend a season in Branson, Missouri. Nothing. It's right up there with Malaga, Spain, as top tourist destinations. I mean,
well, anyway, it's not that this necessarily means anything, but you've got some, the start of some connections building there, be it through Link, be it through getting some roots down in Oklahoma, although I wouldn't say Oklahoma is necessarily a hotbed for high school basketball recruiting. They do have good players there. And then, of course, the MoKan program in Kansas City, which a lot of programs have tried over the years to get their hooks in as far as recruiting goes. So, aside from the player himself, who I believe is a very talented player and exactly the type of player that you kind of want to build your roster around in today's game through those types of guys, you've got some interesting other connections as well. So that is my initial thought.
Yeah, so it does, appear after watching some film, and I know that you're probably not hopping on the film the same way that Matt and I do, and I don't hop on the film the same way that Matt does. Matt will sit down and watch like 6 or 8 games in a row. I will watch just like segments of a game here and there, just to make sure that I'm kind of getting a gist of how he kind of plays within the flow of his own team and all that kind of stuff. But what Missouri is getting is they're basically getting a physical guard. He has good size. The shot mechanics look good. He plays very hard, and he's very tough on defense. I think when you script the kind of player that Dennis Gates wants to kind of build around, he has a lot of the things that Gates wants, and on top of that, he is a skilled player. So he's a guy who can kind of play 1 through 3. And he can probably defend, with size and some added strength. Once he gets in, he could probably, defend all the way up to the 4. He's not an elite athlete, but he's not a bad athlete. He's a good athlete. And so I think all those things are going to translate to the kind of player who Be able to move himself up in the national rankings over the course of the rest of the summer and into next year. I don't know that I would see him jumping up into like a high 4-star range, but I think maybe in like the top 75. I think currently he's like 95th. So he's a guy with a ceiling that I think is good and one that will hopefully project well to the college level. Him being already committed after John Bol decommitted, of course he throws something up on Instagram, basically, teasing that he's going to, recruit Bol to the Missouri roster. I don't really know what to make of the entire John Bol situation. It sounds like it's a little messy. It's unusual for a kid to commit to a program and then 3 weeks later decommit. Especially when, there's external information kind of floating around that, we've all sort of heard about, like wanting to be kind of close to his mentor. And now I believe, Marcus Wilson is his adopted father. We've talked before about having respect for Wilson. So I don't think this is a situation where, Wilson is really doing a lot of meddling, but I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to find the right fit for maybe them both, and how that impacts where Bol ends up, I think is going to be an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, I won't speak on the off-court issues. I don't even call them issues. I don't know enough about that. But it is very, very strange that you mentioned 3 weeks and nothing happened, outward that would change that. An assistant coach didn't leave, a head coach didn't leave, someone else didn't get hired somewhere else. It was just, I don't know. So personally,
there were some rumors going around that it might have been like NIL related. I mean, maybe Florida made some promises that they couldn't back up. I don't know. That seems unlikely to me. Like, I don't see how something could fundamentally change that much in 3 weeks. As much as maybe it was, like when it came down to kind of the brass tacks of it and what they were looking for, which I think they were looking for either Wilson to be in proximity or actually have a job within the program. I don't necessarily think having a job within the program was had to be a done deal, but I think they wanted to be close. So it may just come down to the fact that, Wilson thought that he had something lined up that fell through. And, Bol deciding that without dad around, I don't really want to be in Gainesville. So, because he also committed to play next season at a prep school in Florida. I can't remember if it was Orlando or Gainesville, but it was somewhere in Florida. One of those two. And I think it was probably Gainesville. But still, it's a weird situation. And I don't think that's going to preclude Missouri from being able to jump in and try to recruit Bol again if he's a guy that they want to recruit.
Sure. Yeah, I think, it happens so fast. When we go back to the Caleb Love situation this spring, Love was on the market and Mizzou threw their hat in the ring, and we both thought that the Tigers were in a very good chance to land him. He goes to Michigan. Mizzou goes off and, continues to recruit as they should. And then it turns out he's open again because of a issue with his transcripts at Michigan. This isn't that. Mizzou hasn't signed a 7-footer that is going to be in the 2024 class yet. So I don't know how that really impacts it, or if it even does. Because I think Mizzou was probably, I shouldn't say how hard they're recruiting him, I don't know, but recruiting him enough to be in his final list. So, it wouldn't surprise me if they jump back in, because it was such a unusual circumstance and how fast he decommitted after seemingly Mizzou being in decent shape as far as what he had said in prior interviews about his visits there and his interviews about the staff and what have you. So I guess it'll just be something to watch. Maybe they have someone they like better now. I don't know. But, there's always going to be room for someone with his physical attributes in a college program.
They do seem to like Trent Burns a lot. Trent Burns is a 7'2" kid out of Houston who actually shoots the ball really well. He seems to be much more in that kind of Jordan Butler style of big, where he's he's got a little bit more of the skill that I think Missouri is looking for. Whether or not they're early enough in the game to sort of get a guy like that, because Burns isn't a guy who's like a high 4 or 5 star kid. He's still in kind of that low 4-star range. So you think that a program like Missouri can kind of slip in and maybe get him on campus pretty quickly. However, Purdue has already had him on campus, and if you want to talk about a program that loves size, then I think Purdue is what you're looking for. But the other guy that I think is worth kind of bringing up is Bishop Boswell, who, when we kind of were told, before Barrett committed, it was basically while Boswell was still on campus, and so the initial thought was like, oh man, he's blown away by his visit, he's going to commit. He did not, but he also did not take his follow-up visits to Georgetown or Georgia. Last reporting seems to be that he is still planning on making a visit to Georgia. Whether or not that happens is a good question. But at this point, Matt, would they take both?
The question is, would they take both? I'm not sure. Should they take both? I am firmly in the camp of yes. As I mentioned with Barrett, these two-way guards that have good size, good athleticism, can play on the ball, can play off the ball. They can do a lot of things. These are the guys that, to me, really are what you build your program around. If you've got 4 or 5 of those type of guys on your roster and they're good, you're going to be a good basketball team. That's all it comes down to. Even if you don't have a dynamic on-ball playmaker, even if you don't have a rim-running 7-footer with NBA potential oozing out of his pores, those guys are going to make you a good basketball team. And I think both Boswell and Barrett are similar in that regard. They're a little bit different players, a little bit different attributes, but they profile similarly. They do a lot of the same things. They defend well. They show composure on the ball when they're on offense. They can play on, they can play off, they can dribble, pass, shoot. These are the type of guys that you have to have in your program. So Mizzou is going to be losing a lot of players next year. I think we came up with 7, maybe 8, depending on who we're counting. And a lot of those guys are the perimeter players. The guys that you have coming back are the freshmen, Caleb Brown, Kurt Lewis. And then once you get beyond that, you've pretty much lost your point guards. You've lost a lot of your perimeter scoring. So I think restocking with those guys in the spring, in fall, and then going into the spring and looking for more transfer additions to add a little bit more experience depth if necessary, that would be the way to go. But I'm fully in favor of spending 2 roster spots each year on guys like that. Love those types of players. And these guys aren't exactly the same, but to give you an example of that, I put Drew Smith in the same category. They're winning basketball players and they affect winning and they produce. Even if it's not in the scoring column, they rebound, they defend, they get assists, they get steals. They impact winning more than almost any other player.
And if we're being completely transparent, I love Boswell. If I had to choose between Boswell or Barrett, I would prefer Boswell. That's not to say I don't like Barrett. I really like Barrett. I think Barrett's going to be a really good college player. I'm hoping that I won't have to make that choice, because I do think I do think that with the amount of turnover that there's going to happen at the end of this next season, that they're going to need a lot of bodies, and so it could make sense to take up to maybe 5 freshmen. They've certainly got some other guards that they're recruiting, but I just like the size and versatility of basically having Barrett and Boswell as your B&B brothers, for the foreseeable future. I think they'd really kind of fit well. Anything else that we need to hit on before we move on from recruiting?
Not really. I would also add in not exactly the comparison. They're different types of players, but when you look back to Mike Anderson's system when he was running Zaire Taylor and JT Tiller out there, who neither were really point guards, neither were really shooting guards, but they were both really good guards on both ends of the floor. And those guys were tremendous, and if you can get guys like that can impact the game in the way that they do, you do it. And I think both Barrett and Bishop Boswell do that.
I would agree.
That's my opinion.
So I think we should move on here to essentially like the roster completion, and we can maybe do so by looking at initially how many kind of players are in that senior class, because I just pulled up my roster count graphic, because I have graduated here from keeping track of the scholarships, and now I'm just onto the roster, because having gone through like the last couple of years of who is in what year of eligibility is difficult enough. But on top of that, it seems like they are putting guys basically as preferred walk-ons who you might otherwise have assumed were on scholarship. And so there's a lot of guys in the roster. So Jesus Carolero, Mr. Elite Academy himself, Noah Carter,
Zeus. Two.
I'm trying to keep this in frame here. Caleb Grill, that's 3. Sean East is 4. Nick Honor 5. Mabor Majak 6. John Tanji 7. Connor Vanover 8. Then you get 3 juniors and Tamar Bates, Caleb Brown, Kurt Lewis. 2 sophomores, Jackson Francois, Aiden Shaw, and then a bunch of freshmen. So you get J.V. Brown, Jordan Butler, Trent Pierce, Anthony Robinson, and Danny Stevens. We're pretty sure Danny Stevens, J.V. Brown, Jackson Francois are all preferred walk-ons. After that, we were thinking Mabor Majak is probably that. Majak is the only senior that has any remaining eligibility after this year. Everybody else is like they're in their COVID season. So we're gonna say goodbye to 7, maybe 8 guys, and that 8th guy is Majak, who may or may not be on scholarship. So that's how the roster currently is. Connor Vanover, brings the size and the sort of skill level that Dennis is wanting. Caleb Brown is back. How excited were you when Connor Vanover committed, Matt?
With Vanover, I was pleased. I think the guy really gets a bad rap among Mizzou fans, and I just so happened to watch this game the other night. From the time that Mizzou, the 2020-2021 Mizzou team visited Fayetteville, and Jeremiah Tillman had an absolute career day. And unfortunately for Mr. Vanover, he was on the receiving end of much of it. And I think Mizzou
Vanover didn't play as bad as, like, I think you even remarked in that, like, he didn't play as bad as he sort of, like, as we remember.
Right.
Because it did sort of feel like Tilly was just sort of having his way with this guy who just was outclassed. And it turns out Tilly was just having his way because he was just having that kind of day.
And he had those games. I mean, Tillman, he was a legitimate all-conference level player that year. So it's no big deal that I guess he would have been here we are with eligibility again. I think he had transferred from Cal, sat out a year, and this was his first year at Arkansas when this game happened. So, you're a year and a half into your college experience, and you've got a fourth-year senior who is very talented and very, very athletic, and just happened to be on a heater, and your team was getting destroyed. So I think there was a kind of a bad rap of that, and I went back and watched some other film and looked at some numbers, and he's been a solid player. I mean, I don't think that Vanover is going to be a replacement for Kobe Brown. But he does different things, and he can impact.
Let's not get carried away here. I don't.
How? Kobe Brown had an excellent year, so it's no shame in that. But I do think
Dennis Gates turns Connor Vanover into a late first round draft pick. I'm gonna build that man a bust in the Hall of Fame. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to Connor Vanover. I really don't. I'm just more making fun of the comparison of he's not replacing Kobe Brown. Kobe Brown turned himself with some help from Dennis Gates into a first round pick. I don't see that happening for Connor Vanover. I do think Connor Vanover will play a lot of years professionally. Probably not at the NBA level, maybe at the NBA level. But he's got some professional basketball ahead of him. And I think he's a guy who's really going to impact the roster this year and be a good player for Missouri.
Yeah, I do too. And I think what was interesting is that, after he left Arkansas, and I'm not a fan of Eric Musselman as a person, but I am a fan of him as a basketball strategy guru. But even then, I found it interesting that he went to Oral Roberts, which is where Paul Mills was coaching. And Mills is a very, very good basketball coach as well, very good offensive coach. For those of you who haven't watched Oral Roberts, Max Acenus came from there, and who's now at Texas. And then Kevin O'Banner, who transferred to Texas Tech, if I recall right. They had some really, really fun offenses. So what I find interesting is that Dennis Gates, who also had a very, very fun offense last year, poached a lower level program for Connor Vanover, but there's a lot of crossover between Oral Roberts' offense and Mizzou's offense, even if not in the X's and O's, in the fact that they are a high-flying offense. They like to shoot threes, and that's what Connor Vanover can help you do. So I do find that it's not that it's just that he came from a low major, but what particular low major that he transferred to that was somewhat interesting to me.
And he is a guy who can provide rim protection. He can rebound the ball defensively as well. And those are two areas where Missouri was, I believe the clinical term is piss poor late season. Is that the right term for it?
Yeah. How many teams are there in Division I basketball? 363, 365. It keeps changing every year.
I think it was 368 last year.
Okay. Well, whatever number it was, Mizzou was one away from last in defensive rebounding for basically the entire season. And that is just, it's okay to not be great on the defensive glass because you're great at other things, but it was so bad, so bad that it's surprising that they were able to overcome it. It really was.
You have any impressions on Caleb Brown and his decision to return? Other than
I was just saying, I'm not particularly surprised by it. I guess I was a little bit more surprised that he was going to transfer in the first place, but and he's going to have a uphill battle when it comes to playing time. But if he likes the coach, if he likes the program, if he likes the people he's around, and the coach believes in him, then I say go for it. And obviously Kobe had a good career at Mizzou. The Browns will forever be remembered as a Mizzou family, despite the very close nature of Kobe Brown apparently transferring this offseason to Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, and am I missing anyone else?
This close to transferring. He was this close.
So I think there could be a lot worse spots for a for a college basketball player than what Mizzou is doing right now. And, if he wanted more playing time, I could see him wanting to leave. And if that's not the top priority, I'm not at all surprised he's back.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was just going to say, like, we've talked before about how the Browns have responded to Columbia and Columbia has responded to the Browns, and I think they're very appreciative of that. And when you do sort of like a place as much as they seem to like Columbia, like, I don't. Sometimes just the college experience and being in a place that you want to be is more important than guaranteed minutes. And if he stays in Missouri for another couple of years, and he's got a college degree, or at least a Missouri degree, which isn't a bad one to have. So kind of moving on and from I guess the completion of the of the names that have completed the roster, and looking at this roster as a whole, it is sort of missing. We talked before about your love of Isaiah Mosley and his efficiency metrics. So Missouri doesn't really have a guy like that on the roster right now. They do have a lot of really good players. And it's going to be a much deeper roster, a roster with some better size. It is going to be interesting to see how they figure out how to score the basketball in late clock situations. But by all accounts, this should be a pretty good team.
I think so, and I would agree with I do believe this is the first time I've been on since Isaiah decided that his time at Mizzou was over, and that did hurt me deeply. He was a very talented player, and Mizzou fans didn't really get to see the full Isaiah Mosley, unfortunately. But it does leave a hole, and it wasn't just Mosley, but DeAndre Golston, somewhat to my surprise, was able to fill in on late clock opportunities, carried a pretty significant portion of the offense when he was on the floor. And then, of course, Kobe Brown, whose usage wasn't quite as high, but a lot of offense was run through Kobe Brown, even if he didn't statistically get credit for it. So when you lose those two guys and then the possibility of Mosley returning, that's a big gap in your usage profile. Who is going to be taking these possessions? How are you going to score? And there's not really an obvious option that I've seen. It's kind of one of those things that I think it's going to have to be a balanced attack. And, just doing math, and I do math once every time I'm on the podcast, but typically you'll have a guy up in that 25% usage, which again, 100%, 5 players averaged out, that's 20. So 25 is pretty high. And then you've got, a few guys around 20 and one a little bit lower. Now you don't really have that. You've got guys that are going to be wedged between 17 and 23%. Some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower. And that's hard because you don't have the security blanket that a guy like Isaiah Mosley could have provided, or blanket that what Golston and Brown did provide, that when you needed a bucket, you just gave it to them and they wouldn't got one. One of those guys might emerge, but it's kind of early right now to really know which one. And as it stands, there's not a guy that's really been that dude in the past. So how that impacts their offense remains to be seen. There are offenses out there that are very good running with no focal point, but it does reduce your margin of error, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see. It's one thing that I'm kind of fascinated with about this team, that it was not that way last year, even though Mizzou had quite a few good players. There were definitely guys who were driving the bus and definitely guys who were sitting in the back. When called upon, they would hit big shots. Nick Honor, for example, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be asked to carry more offense this year, if I had to guess. His usage rate last year, I believe, was 13.6%, which is ridiculously low. But he took great shots and he made them.
Yeah, I was going to say a starting point guard. It's pretty much unheard of for a starting point guard to be that low in usage.
Right. So he's going to have to probably carry more slack. I'm guessing.
To his credit, by the way, part of the reason why his usage is so low is because he doesn't turn the ball over.
It's true.
That is part of your usage. So if you are like point guards handle the ball a lot, and if they turn the ball over, like they're getting some negative credit for that. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Like it just popped into my head, and I had to get it out.
It's going to be an interesting group to watch. I think there's upside there. It's just going to be a matter of how well they can strike the balance that needs to be struck. There's not an obvious guy that, hey, if things are not going well, we're going to focus on him, and we've got our security blanket there. This year, it's going to be a more team-oriented attack. We're not going to see a guy score 20 and 18 and the rest in single digits. I think it's going to be more, like, can we get 4 or 5 guys between 10 and 14 points? And if they can, that's great. I do think they're going to be heavily reliant on 3-point shooting, which, if you want to segue into that, is another topic.
It's time to pivot. So I almost feel like maybe I'll talk to Levi and we'll have like a little graphic that'll pop up. It'll be like Mizzou's data points or something like that. I don't know what we're gonna call it, but you've got Nuggets, and I like Nuggets. I think Nuggets are fun. It's sort of like why does anybody follow like Tom Orff on Twitter? Is because like he just tweets out the most random nuggets about like Mizzou sports and Cardinals and stuff like that. It's just like, that's not super relevant, but it is interesting. And
if you don't follow Tom Orff, you should.
Yeah. What's his Twitter handle? It's like MU114 or something like that.
I can look it up.
Yeah.
If you want to keep speaking, I can actually put it out there for our listeners. I fully endorse Tom Orff.
He is the Mizzou nugget man. Especially when games are going. There will be like something that will happen during a football game or a basketball game, and he'll tweet out, be like, Nick Honor just hit his 4th 3-pointer in the span of 3.5 minutes. The last time this happened was in Clarence Gilbert in 2000. And you're just like, oh, like that's interesting. I don't know how you looked that up, but
it is at MU4124. His name is Tom Orff with ORF. So again, MU4124. Give him a follow. I'm just looking at his last few tweets and exactly what you're describing. It's Cardinals related since they're in season, but for Mizzou basketball, it's the same way. It's great stuff.
Yeah, if you're not a Cardinal fan, you will have to suffer through some Cardinal tweets during the baseball season. But it's no different than following any other sports writer in their off season. Getting back to your Nuggets, you have some Nuggets, and specifically like the thing that you kind of threw this into our Slack chat the other day. Was like some of the 3-point shooting things that I'm kind of fascinated to see where this goes.
Well, I believe it was, I don't remember which of the come home tour that Dennis Gates and Eli Drinkwitz and the athletic director and various other staff have been going around to speak to groups of fans in different locations. And I believe one of them, it was reported that Dennis Gates had said that he hoped his team would be able to shoot 1,000 threes this year. And he wants to lead the country in 3-point shooting, whether that means attempts or percentage. I'm guessing both. That remains to be seen. But I was interested in just what this roster had done. So I looked at 2 different things. I took every player on this roster that had accumulated college stats, and only Division I. I didn't go into the JUCO. but Division I stats that if this team, you took all those career stats, if this team was that team, they would rank top 10 in 3-point shooting rate, which means versus 2-point shots, the percentage of shots which are taken behind the arc, and they would have finished about 33.5% as far as accuracy goes, which isn't great. But again, we're talking about career stats, and guys are freshmen and now they're seniors, so that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be a good shooting team. But then I looked at that same process, but only looked at the players last year in Division I basketball. And the 3-point shooting rate was even higher. It would have been top 5 this last year, and the percentage would have been about 34.5%, 35% as far as accuracy goes. So when you look at the team that Dennis Gates has put together, it's pretty obvious that they're going to be shooting 3-pointers a lot. It doesn't mean that they're not going to try and get inside. That's a part and parcel with what you're doing in modern basketball. But if you guys thought Mizzou was shooting a lot of 3-pointers last year, I would say prepare yourselves. It's going to be even more 3-point baskets that are coming your way this year. So yeah, it's if they can be a 35% 3-point shooting team, they're going to be pretty good. Mizzou shot 36 last year, and the problem wasn't the overall percentage, it was the consistency in attaining that. We had a few games where Mizzou went 3 of 28, and then a few games where they were 14 of 20, just as an example, to make up for that. So I think the big question will be, if they can shoot a lot of threes and they are making a fair percentage, can they do that game in, game out, or is it going to be the feast or famine? And that could impact winning a lot.
You'd had a tweet where you sort of followed up and looked at like kind of the same numbers for the national champion UConn Huskies, and sort of like their 3-point shooting in wins and 3-point shooting in losses, and the difference between Missouri's shooting and UConn shooting in losses was still very high variable. Where Missouri was really shooting poorly, and like there's going to be games where you struggle, right? And I think
right
when you look at when you look at a 30 plus game season, like you have to count on X number of games where you're not going to make the kind of shots that you want to make. And you're going to have to figure out other ways to score. Missouri's problem last year, and I don't think I'm breaking any news here, but Missouri's problem last year is when they struggled to shoot the ball from outside, they struggled to score, and because their defense was so bad, and their rebounding specifically was so bad, it basically made it impossible for them to win games because they couldn't stop the other team. That's really what bit them in the road games in conference play, and honestly, it's what kind of kept some lesser teams in games in non-conference play. So for this team with this roster, we've already kind of talked about not having that alpha. What happens when it's a bad shooting night? Like what is the backup plan? If you're trying to shoot 1,000 threes, which did you calculate how many threes that is per game?
Well, assuming it's a 31 game season, I can do it real quick. 32.3 3-point attempts a game if you're playing 31 games.
So 32 threes a game, which on an average game, you're maybe trying to push towards 70 possessions.
Right. Give or take.
Right. And possessions that don't include turnovers, and again, like Missouri's done a good job this past year, at least under Dennis Gates, kind of taking care of the ball. So let's just give them 8 turnovers. So now you're at 40 possessions. and then you get a handful of free throw attempts. So you're almost at like a 50-50 split of threes to twos, which where if they were to hit 50%, where would that rank them? You have KenPom up right now?
I don't have KenPom up, but I believe there was one or two teams that were above 50% on 3-point attempt rate, and then 48 and 49% were top 5 and top 10. So if you're above 48%, you're top 10 as far as 3-point attempt rate or thereabouts. I think it might have been 48.5, but yeah.
Yeah, anytime we're recording this, everything always kind of runs a little slow. So I'm just gonna have to take your word on that. But
I'm right there. So here, let me pull it up. I don't want to misrepresent anything. I don't want to get in trouble for passing along bad facts. All right. So last year, the 3-point attempt rate, the number one team, most 3-pointers compared to 2-pointers attempted, was Chattanooga at 52.1%. They were the only one above 50. There was one team, San Francisco, above 49. There were 4 teams above 48. So 47 was top 10 and 48 is top 5. And this team projects to be 48 to 49%, at least based on prior seasons of what they've actually done as players. So there you go.
And you provided all of that before I could even get logged in.
And I will say, since we're on the topic, before we move on, I did look up the tweet that I had about UConn. And again, I didn't want to be wrong. UConn shot 36.3% from behind the arc, and Mizzou shot 36%. So very similar 3-point shooting teams, but in wins, UConn shot 37.8, and in losses, they shot 30.9. Conversely, Missouri in wins shot 39.8, which is much better, and they shot 24.8% in losses, which is much worse. So that's called variance. And if anyone's done any gambling, you know what variance is. It means that you're going to have peaks and valleys, and the higher variance, the bigger the peaks and the bigger the valleys. So if you can be a 36% shooting team and all of your games fall between 37 and 35%, you're going to be a really consistent team. Whereas if you're shooting 45% some games and 25% others, your wins and losses are going to be all over the board. So it's about honing in and being consistent in attaining that percentage. And Missouri was pretty good at that, but when they were bad, they were bad.
And I would also like to point out that one of the things that they were so bad at last year should not be as bad this year. They have better defensive players. Caleb Grill is a noted good defender. John Tanji is a noted good defender. Vanover should be able to provide some rim protection. Tamar Bates is a good defender. Aiden Shaw, I think a lot of people are kind of expecting him to be able to kind of take a leap. If he does, he is a very good defender. And having guys with more size, a little bit stronger and more active bodies who can rebound, because I think as much, too much of Missouri's issues in rebounding were made about how big their roster was last year. And I don't really think that it was so much a size issue as they just had guys who are not good rebounders.
Agreed.
And I think, I do think that Kobe and Noah were pretty good rebounder. I think Kobe's a good rebounder. Noah's a pretty good rebounder. But I don't think their guards were very good rebounders. I don't think DeAndre Golston was a good rebounder. I don't think the boy Hodge was a good rebounder. Nick Honor hasn't really shown that he'll do more than maybe collect a long rebound here and there. And I think Sean East is kind of the same way. So what you've done is you've essentially upgraded your wings and hoping that and I do think having a guy like Vanover and even Carlero can help with rebounding, but I think the bigger thing for Missouri is going to be what Bates and Grill and Tanji do with that category.
I think the depth helps too, especially on the defensive end. Last year, Mizzou was often tasked with having to play 6, 7 guys and not really comfortable going any deeper, where I think Dennis Gates he may not quite be Leonard Hamilton when it comes to playing 10, 11 guys pretty routinely every night, but no coach that plays with any sort of tempo wants to go into a game only expecting to play 6 or 7 guys heavy minutes. It's not doable, especially if you're trying to create turnovers, which I don't think really anything that Mizzou does going forward is really going to have them deviate from that being the primary goal of the defense. And creating turnovers. Obviously, they want to get better at shot defense. They want to get better at rebounding, but Dennis Gates' teams have always been focused on getting turnovers, and I think that's a good thing. But if you don't have the legs to get through 40 minutes, it's kind of the Fran Fraschilla, only the opposite. The pressure is cumulative. I mean, it wears out the guys trying to do it too. And if you're a jump shooting team, that's a problem down the stretch. That if you're running and trying to get guys play 30, 35 minutes a night and they're playing pressure defense and then it's coming down the stretch, you got to have guys with fresh legs to go in there and knock down jump shots. And if you've been doing that all game, it's hard. It's a hard ask. And Mizzou definitely had that problem during times in conference play last year. So, point being, I think if nothing else, this roster is going to have more players who can play on a given night than last year did. And that, I think, will be an improvement. And we'll see that improvement manifest in the defensive numbers.
Well, we hope so.
Hope so.
Do you have any other nuggets for the people?
No, I've been sharing most of my good stuff on the interwebs. So, go check out my Twitter handle and you'll get some funny GIFs and some.
If you can get Twitter to load, which I will, it has been loading a little better. I guess Elon expanded how much we can look at. Yeah, and I would encourage people, if you're on Twitter, to follow Matt. He has lots of good nuggets. He also will occasionally post some video of guys that you probably like dunking on guys that you don't. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably watch a couple of games and might throw a video up that you'll remember, but you might have forgotten about. So it's the off season. Have a little fun. It's not as serious as in season when I'm out there digging through the data and it's, life or death numbers that you just have to know this stuff. Now it's a little bit more lighthearted.
Yeah. Well, it is the 4th of July, almost for us. We're recording this prior to. You have any 4th of July plans?
Anything big. We're gonna go watch some fireworks. Have some family over, have some folks over. I'll probably try and avoid getting smothered by my pet border collie, who is not a fan of fireworks and will inevitably be sitting on my face as soon as the first one goes off. So, other than that, nothing big, but we made it out to the zoo today, saw some interesting statues, and
more things that you put on Twitter.
Why not, right? I mean, when you see something like that, you gotta, I don't know how you commission a statue like that. I'll just put it that way.
Well, that's it for us. We're trying some new things here, so I don't know how many videos or podcasts you will have watched or listened to get to the end of this. And so it's an experiment, and so things may be a little bit weird here and there from the feed for the next few weeks as we kind of try to get used to our new formats and hopefully some even new faces popping up. But all the same, of our usual sign off stays true. If you're on Twitter and you want to follow him, you can at Data Mizzou. You can also follow the other Matt, who we spoke of a few times tonight. He's the film guy at Matt J Harris 85. My Twitter handle's not on here. I'm not tweeting a whole lot these days. I do sort of post my articles and retweet some folks here and there, but I feel like people are getting like madder and madder on Twitter, and I don't have enough time for all that. So I'm just gonna keep a low profile. So you can follow me if you want. If you don't, my feelings won't be hurt. It's a mostly useless website anyway. But there are some fun things like Tom Orff and at
Tom Orff.
Yeah, Tom Orff.
You will not be disappointed by following Tom Orff. He will not disappoint you. Do it.
And do please follow the Rock'em Nation flagship, because that does help the site at Rock'em Nation. Head over to rockemnation.com and read the articles. That helps us more. That's probably the thing that you can do the most to help us and the site. And then probably the biggest thing is make sure you're subscribed to this feed, because then you get all these and it helps spread the word. It helps people be engaged and know what's going on. Subscribe to the YouTube feed if you're not already. There's a little subscribe button at the bottom of this video. I think I can see it. But hit that, and then we'll be back. Maybe not with this guy. We'll be back with somebody in a few weeks, and we're just going to keep this thing going. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great 4th.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. Bing! And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.